Good morning, everyone. Are we on? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the event this morning on blockchain. We've got three fantastic speakers. First up, we've got Dr. Pip Ryan and Mark von Rijmenam. And our next speaker will be Phil Shelper. I'm going to pass over to our speakers right away so they can give you a bit of background about who they are and how they arrived at today's talk. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pip. I arrived here by train. Thank you, Chantal, for having us this morning. This is a very nice event and a great venue. It's very, very kind of you to host this. Okay, so the reason why I'm interested in blockchain is because I have a PhD in breach of trust, and in 2015 somebody said to me, blockchain enables trustless relationships, and I thought, I don't think so. Turns out I might have been wrong about that, but anyway, that's a journey I'm still on, which is great. So the reason why we're here today is because we have written a book. Mark and I have co-authored a book. It's Mark's work of genius. I'd love to take claim for having thought of it. It was Mark's idea. I'm just along for the ride. And also, I teach at the University of Technology here in Sydney. I'm a lecturer in law, and I teach subjects like disruptive technologies in the law and law policy, ethics and technology. And also I am on the Standards Australia Blockchain Technical Committee, so I'm the lead on a project to develop a technical specification, which may end up being standards, for smart contracts, blockchain and distributed ledger-based smart contracts. Also a massive learning curve for me, learning every day, which is fantastic, and enjoying it enormously, so I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you very much, Pip. I couldn't have written the book without you, so yeah. It was actually quite interesting to be here because I came to Australia about 2.5 years ago, and it was the first time I was here in Australia about, I think, 1 or 2 weeks, and I spoke to one of the first meetups from Chantal 2.5 years ago. And actually I'm leaving tomorrow, Australia, so it's like coming full circle, so that's pretty good. I'm doing a PhD at UTS at the moment, and Pip and I met at a blockchain workshop about 2 years ago. Which is when I decided to change my PhD into the blockchain world because I think it's a fascinating area. So that's how later on we decided to write a book, Blockchain Transforming Your Business and Our World, but more on that later. So I'm also the founder of Datafloq, which is a content platform around emerging technology, and I'm building a new platform which is called Discover It, which is a decentralized collaboration platform for individuals, organizations and things, where everything is governed by reputation. So that's really basically bringing everything together that I do for my PhD, which is on big data, blockchain and AI, bringing together into one company. But enough about that, let's just dive into the world of blockchain. Just before I start, if I would ask anyone in the room to explain blockchain, who could do so? Alright, I won't do that, but it's always an interesting question to ask because a lot of people have heard about blockchain, but a lot of people have really no idea what it actually is. But it really is, blockchain enables this peer-to-peer collaboration, you know, in ways that wasn't possible before. And a couple of years ago, already in 2015, Goldman Sachs said that blockchain will change everything. And I think so. The more we set out on our journey for the book, we found out that it truly is. And it not only changes the financial world, but it even more changes the world also in terms of really trying to improve the world unlike we could have done before. So it's not only the financial services industry that can benefit from blockchain, but basically any industry can do so. So, but first let's explain what blockchain is, because in order to understand that blockchain can change the world, we first need to know what blockchain actually is. So, in its bare essence, a blockchain is nothing more, nothing less than a database. Instead of having a read, write, and edit database, you have a read and write database. That's it. You know, that's all. Basically, all you need to know to understand why blockchain is different. But of course, there's more to it, because the fact that the blockchain is only read-write makes it possible that you have data on the blockchain which becomes immutable. So you can't change the data on the blockchain. In addition, because all transactions, as they are called, are recorded on the blockchain, you can go back in time and really see all the transactions that have happened since the start of the blockchain. And that's also because all the transactions on the blockchain are time-stamped, so you know exactly when a certain transaction happened and how. It's important to know that there's not just one blockchain. There are dozens and dozens of blockchains, and they are basically distributed ledger technology. So it's that's sort of the overall umbrella for this type of technology. Just to explain how it works, to give you a bit of an idea, I'll use the Bitcoin blockchain, which is sort of, you know, Bitcoin was conceived by Satoshi Nakamoto, whom we don't know who he or she or they are, but they sort of came up with the idea of Bitcoin to solve the double spending problem that's normally involved with having a digital currency. Because digital currencies have been around for decades, but we could never solve the issue of stopping people to spend the same currency twice. Because if I have cash, I can give it to Pip. You know, I don't have the cash. Pip has the cash. But if I have a digital $10, I can give it to Pip, I can give it to you, I can give it to you. Now you can copy it. And Satoshi Nakamoto first solved that issue. And the underlying technology that was created for that was the blockchain. And you could say that Bitcoin is the first application of a blockchain, of blockchain technology. So how does it work? Basically, the idea is that if you it's peer-to-peer collaboration. So if I transfer money, for example, to Pip, and I don't know Pip, so I don't trust Pip, so I use a bank. I use a third party to do so. And the bank knows me, the bank knows Pip, and through that, the transaction is done. The bank facilitates that transaction, but of course the bank wants some money for that, because nothing happens for free. However, in the blockchain world, this kind of trust that is being required is being created through cryptography. So it's sort of difficult mathematics. And in order to do so, instead of the bank validating a transaction, we use cryptography to validate transactions. So we have a blockchain, which is just a database, which is recorded on millions of computers. And with those millions of computers, we need to come to a consensus of what the state of the network is. Because otherwise, you know, everyone can update whatever they want, and we have no idea, no common grounds of what the state of the database is. So we need someone within that network of millions of computers to say, well, this is the state of the network. And how that works with the Bitcoin blockchain is that they have come up with a consensus mechanism, which is called proof of work, which basically means you need to solve a very difficult mathematical equation, which takes about 10 minutes. And the first one to solve that is allowed to say, this is the state of the network. And the moment that computer says so, everyone else in the network will agree to that. And that's how it basically works. And this consensus mechanism, the difficulty changes with the more people, the more computers join the network, it becomes more difficult, and the less computers come there, it becomes easier. So that every time it takes about 10 minutes. So we have a transaction, I send money to Pip, I submit it to the network does the work, which I call the miners. Those are the ones who do the mathematical equation, solve it, and then verify the transaction. The moment it's verified, the block, because the block consists of about a couple 100,000 transactions, the block is added to the blockchain by hashing the block. What does it mean? Hashing basically means you have a piece of data and you turn it into a long string of numbers. You can do it only one way, you can't do it the other way around. And the beauty of this is that if you do it now, and you don't change the data, and you do it 10 years from now, the hash, long string of numbers, will always be the same. However, if you change one bit in the data, the hash changes completely. And that allows you to determine whether or not data has been changed, or a document, or a block, or whatever has been changed. So the hash of one block is the starting point of the next block of transactions. That's how the blocks are chained together, and it's blockchain. And if you change something in the data on one block, automatically the hash for the next block will change, and the next block, and the next block, and the next block, etc. That is how data becomes immutable. And then the final aspect is that we put a timestamp on it. Well, this transaction is added at this moment, and that allows us to double check whether a transaction has been done before, whether I spent the $10 once or twice or 3 times. So with the fact that we have a consensus mechanism, where a database, or a network of millions of computers storing the same database, with miners verifying transactions, determining the state of the network, we have a hash algorithm, which makes the data on the blockchain immutable, because we can check if data has been changed. and we have a timestamp to verify and make it traceable. So these three characteristics of immutability, verifiability, and traceability really changes everything. Because all of a sudden, we can make transactions with people whom we don't know, organizations or things we don't know, and we can be certain that the transaction or the data is correct. And with that, we have a completely new way of building a society. And so this is a bit of an older picture already, but it sort of shows you in terms of the financial sector areas where things can change. As I said, it's already a bit of an older picture because nowadays basically any industry where there is a trust issue and where there's a transaction taking place, and then transaction in the broader sense of the word, which is basically anything that any means of exchange, whether it's data, whether it's money, whether it's content, whether it's offline goods, etc. Blockchain can be a solution. So, and one of the components which is especially interesting is the smart contracts, because that's sort of a killer application for blockchain. And a smart contract is nothing more than an if this, then that statement. So if precondition X happens, then outcome Y will automatically occur. So it's a computerized protocol that executes a term of a contract automatically without discretion. And because these smart contracts, which are basically small software programs, they are also on the blockchain. And with that, they become immutable, verifiable, and traceable. And that really makes it possible to sort of automate all kinds of agreements and tasks and be certain that they will execute. So if I sell my house to Pip, and we use the smart contract for that, and Pip transfers the money, automatically, there's nothing I can do to stop that, the ownership of my house will transfer to Pip. And that, of course, takes out all the need for a real estate agent, for a bank, for a lawyer, or whatever, all these jobs that won't be necessary anymore because these things can be carried out by smart contracts on the blockchain. So smart contracts are really changing governance, organization design, and how we build organizations. Of course, we have to talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies because cryptocurrencies are hot. Everyone knows about Bitcoin, but there are about 1,600 different cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin was only the first. I don't believe in Bitcoin. I think it's a flawed cryptocurrency because it's expensive, it's environmentally friendly. It takes about half percent of the world's energy power to verify these transactions, which I think is in times of climate change is unacceptable. But there are a whole bunch of different tokens. So you have in Bitcoin was the first, but you have 4 different types of tokens. You have a currency token, like Bitcoin. You have a security token, which is sort of an investment token, where you bet that the value of the token will increase over time, and by that you make money. You have an asset token, which is a token that is backed by a certain asset, for example, a car or an art or a diamond, and you put the characteristics of that diamond, for example, on the blockchain. You put the ownership on the blockchain. You hash, what I mean with that is you have the document with all the characteristics and with ownership. You hash that, put it on the blockchain, and you can always check if the document has been changed. And you have utility tokens, which is a token that are used to perform some sort of transaction on the platform. If I talk about my platform, Discover It, which I mentioned earlier, we will build a utility token where we allow people to buy and to create content, for example. And we don't really use it to increase in value, which of course we hope it will, but it's predominantly used to buy or create content. And with that small introduction, I'd like to give the floor to Pip to tell a bit more about the other possibilities of blockchain.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for that. He's going to be back. Okay, I can't help myself. This is like exercising a right of reply that I always think I have. So it's not a reply. This is a not but an and. So when Mark talks about, for example, being able to say you can automate the payment for the house is a physical thing and it doesn't obviously transfer digitally very well. Not yet. Anyway, we're not there with physical presence. What you're doing is you're taking the registration of title, the certificate of title of the house, and you're creating a digital immutable imprint of that on its own network. It could be on a blockchain as well. And the smart contract is doing the exchange of one for the other. It manages the handshake. And in Australia, we lead the world with the way that we register certificates of title and the way that we manage our land title system. We already have a pretty perfect blockchain type system, but that's not the case in many countries around the world. and the idea that you would identify precisely what the block of land is and its limits, its survey, and then have a plan for exactly how you describe it, maybe a GPS reference, and then registering it electronically and exchanging it for value, and being able to do that digitally without needing an agent or a bank is revolutionary. And if you don't trust your bank, if you live in an economy or in a jurisdiction where you can't trust your bank because it's maybe government run and you don't trust your government, that may be alien for us here in Australia on a level. But you see, in Australia, I can say that. I'm not about to be arrested. But there are jurisdictions, of course, in the world where you can't actually trust that you can make these transactions through any kind of intermediary or third party. In Kenya, about 25% of financial transactions are conducted through mobile phone credit. And that's how you avoid having to use untrusted intermediaries. You trust your telco and not your bank. So these relationships of trust are really important, and I call that little t trust. It's not like the kind of trust I've explored when I think about breach of trust in my PhD, but that whole idea about different types of trust, agency, fiduciary obligations, they do play out, because there are some circumstances where mathematically securing or cryptographically verifying something can be more powerful and more trustworthy than a human agent. Humans, when incentivized by greed, or when they're confused by stupidity, so this is the cupidity-stupidity formula for humans, can be very, very annoying and very expensive, whereas in maths we can trust. And so, I mean, obviously you wait for your circumstances to arise where one is going to prevail, but this is a thing. Now, it's a thing that's probably created by the internet. Prior to the internet, if we wanted to do business with someone, chances are we'd want to meet them or send our trusted agent to meet them, if you think post-industrialisation. If you want to go back to medieval villages, we probably knew everyone. You can go to small country towns in Australia where you can't actually afford to act dishonestly because everyone knows each other. So what we're creating with this blockchain technology is global villages where actually the cryptographic proofs are managing the trust relationships and basically doing this by advertising to the world what's going on. I always think of that final line of the song by Peter Gabriel, Biko, about the murder, or you could even say assassination of Steve Biko in 1977 in Port Elizabeth in South Africa during the apartheid era. Mandela was obviously being held on Robben Island, but Biko had been arrested and he was killed in a jail cell in Port Elizabeth in 1977. And the last line of Peter Gabriel's song is, "And the whole of the world is watching now." That's what we're talking about. It's advertising to the world what's going on and letting everybody know. So when you talk about Bitcoin, it flips something that we accept as a given in our society, which is we make ourselves known in a financial environment and we keep private our financial transactions. Bitcoin flips that, and it says we will all know each other's financial transactions. What we won't know is who we are. So when we talk about transforming business and having new provenance protocols or privacy and data sharing and security, this is what we're talking about. The transformation, the transformative aspect of this is the fact that you make public and known to everyone. The whole of the world is watching as you manage provenance, the origins of something, or as you consider the way you share data. And the thing that you can keep anonymous, or to be more accurate, pseudonymous, is the identity of the actors in that environment. And if you do need to be known, you could do that separately. You could do it off-chain. You don't, on a blockchain, need to identify who you are, but there's nothing to stop you from verifying your identity or verifying the certificate of title for property off-chain. And you can do that, you do it with Bitcoin transactions and when you first set up a wallet. So, do you want me to speak to this one as well, Mark? Okay, so transforming our world, improving identity and corruption. So what we're trying to suggest with this whole idea, this is just one chapter of the 7 core areas. Obviously, these are 2 very, very different components. What you do with identity in the world of blockchain is, I think, probably one of the hardest pieces that has to be done, and that Mark's going to speak to that. And when we talk about corruption, I'm going to come to that at the end. But the way I wanted to just introduce this was to say that in the world of online interactions, everybody has to understand that you're either a node or you're a user. And the nodes are the computers that are interacting and managing cryptographic proofs and the proof of work. And the users are the humans and the entities who sit behind that and who are affected by it. And just making that distinction is really important, because when you want to actually manage identity or corruption or manage transactions and limit fraud, you need to know the distinction between what's the proof of work and how do you identify who's controlling it. In other words, who are the users. I don't think I need to say much more than that, except to, and do you want to do, oh, I can go on to the SDGs. Okay, so in 2015, the United Nations put together a project which stated that 17 goals were going to be put into the UN sites for 2030 to try and improve the circumstances, particularly for developing countries and their vulnerable populations, to improve their circumstances in relation to 17 different conditions. And they are easily found. You can just Google UN SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable means that you create solutions that can be self-sustaining. You don't constantly send in aid and the aid agents, and you're not constantly patching up after floods and famine and crisis and climate change, and also the effects of human interference with natural processes and good financial processes and institutions. You make them internally and inherently sustainable. That's the goal. In July 2017, after Mark and I had finished the first draft of the book, the United Nations UN DESA produced a report with an update of how they're tracking. How are we tracking on the goals? And there were two interesting things that came out of that. Tracking well, but unevenly. And unfortunately, most of the best progress has been made by the developing countries. The most vulnerable countries seem to be those that are either landlocked or those that are most susceptible to conflict and climate insecurity. And the second interesting fact that came out, which really feeds into Mark's and my work and caused us to do a little bit of a kick-in revision into the book at the end of last year, was that there was a realisation that if the UN doesn't start managing the way it regards data and treats data and understands it, good data, bad data, correlation versus causation, aggregated data, inferred, scraped, metadata, all of the information that we can glean has to be siloed, warehoused, distilled, understood, and it has to be verified, because bad data leads to bad decisions. And it's another layer that can add value when you think about what blockchain can do to verify truth and also provenance. So it's really interesting that we can go to a really granular level on any one of these problems, and Mark and I can articulate in the book really strong proposals for blockchain-based solutions, but you can also take it at a meta level and say you can track the success of this also using blockchain-based technologies to verify data. So with that said, we've got a definition of wicked problems. Do you want me to quickly go through this? Okay, so the way we see it is threefold. So we use the term wicked problems to describe the UN Sustainable Development Goals and what's holding them up, what's blocking them from being achieved, in terms of evil, awesome, and impossible to solve. Evil in the sense that these are universally accepted in situations of insecurity that need to be resolved and addressed. Awesome in the sense that wouldn't it be wicked if we could actually resolve these problems? So we're just playing with that. I guess it's a very sort of oxymoronic use of this adjective, because we actually mean wicked as in superb, terrific, awesome. But then impossible to solve, this is actually a cryptographic or a computational term. When you talk about a wicked problem, what you're talking about is one that has so many layers or so many frames that as you solve one part of the problem, you actually create another problem that is very difficult to solve. There are plenty of examples that you can use, but if you just example with fishing, if you want to tell a village that they have to fish less or fish in a way that's more sustainable, chances are you're telling that village to take less fish, to fish for less food. And so it creates a problem that they don't have as much food. But if you don't stop it, and control it and store the amount of fishing, you will actually run out of fish. And so internal paradoxes prevent the solution itself. That's a wicked problem. So with that said, I'll hand over to the beautiful Mark, who will take you onto this next part of the journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think it's brilliantly said how Pip explained wicked problems, because what we try to do within the book is look at these 7 different wicked problems or 7 sustainable development goals, how they can be solved using or can be achieved better by using blockchain. And what we found is that one of the first problems we need to solve is identity. Because you might not know it, but we have an identity problem. Because identity is, you think that identity is well taken care of, but it's basically it's not. You know, there are about 1.5 billion people in the world who don't have a government-issued identity. When they created the internet in the 70s, 80s, 90s, they did a few things very well. You know, they created all these beautiful standards around DNS, TCP/IP, and HTTP, etc. But they forgot a few things. And one of the things they forgot was an identity protocol. So how can we use our offline identity online? Because at the moment, you really can't. So at the moment, proving your identity without risk of losing your identity is very, very difficult, or with violating your privacy. And for example, if you want to go to a bar, you have to prove your age, that you're over 25 years old, for example. What you do is you give your driving license. That's just, that's what you do, that's what's required, because otherwise you don't enter the bar. But that's really weird if you think about it, because the only thing they need to know is, are you older than 25 years, yes or no? That's a binary question. But instead, you give your driving license, which has your name, your date of birth, your address, your photo, your social security number maybe, all these kind of details, and they scan it, and then they have it. You have no idea what they're going to do with it. And I think we think that's wrong, and that's why we need to solve that. It can be solved. It's called a self-sovereign identity, and a lot of startups are working on it. But when we started writing the book, we started to think, what is identity? Because in order to solve the identity problem, you need to know what is identity. And of course, we're not the first one who thought about identity. Identity has been thought about for the past millennia. But anyway, we started thinking, well, what is identity? And when we found the answer, there are basically 3 things that have an identity. It's people, you and I. It's organizations. But in a more and more connected world, there's also things that have an identity. So we have 3 entities that have an identity. And then we started to think of what makes up this identity for these 3 entities. And there are basically 3 things. First of all is your attributes. So your attributes basically are your long-term attributes, which stay with you, for example, your entire life, for example, your date of birth, or are your mid-long attributes, which is, for example, can be your address where you've been living for the past 5 years. And you have short-term attributes, which change on a daily basis, for example, which can be your clothing. The way you dress today can be completely showcase a completely different identity than tomorrow. That's how it works for people, but that's also how it works for things. Things also have attributes. These are the characteristics of a device, for example. And the same goes for organizations. The second part of what makes up identity is what we think is reputation. Reputation means how reputable are you? How trustworthy are you? What the village that Pip was talking about. And it's very important that the work that you do, for example, determines how reputable people are, think you are. Do you do what you say you will do? And the same goes for organizations and things. Now, if you have a connected device, does it do what the manufacturer says it will do? How reputable is a connected device? And the final part of the identity, which is what we call is shadow reputation, which basically means the people or the things in your network. For example, if you have criminal friends, that shines negatively on you. But if you are a connected device and you are connected to a device which is infested with malware, that shines negatively on the device as well. And the same goes for organizations. So attributes, reputation, and shadow reputation make up our identity. And this is very important to know, to understand how we can change our identity system for the 21st century. And how we can do that is basically making identity personal, private, persistent, portable, and protected. So how does that work? So first of all, it's personal. It should be yours. At the moment, your identity is not yours. You think it's yours, but it's not. Now, if you go to Facebook, if Facebook wants to delete you, and with one push of the button, you're gone. At the moment, your identity is not yours. It's private, Well, certainly at the moment, identity is not private, as my example showed of the bar earlier. But in 21st century, we should be able to control our own identity and determine what do we give away. And if we have to prove our age, we only have to say yes or no. Right? We don't need to give all the information. But if we want to buy an airline ticket, for example, we can say, well, this airline company can have our passport number because we need it to travel. But we determine what we give and how we give it, not the airline company, not the government. It's also persistent, which means it shouldn't change over time unless you want it to change. It shouldn't be able to, not third parties should be able to change it on your behalf. As mentioned, if Facebook wants to change your identity, they can do it without you even knowing it. Fourth, it should be portable. In today's world, it's really weird that if you are a 5-star Uber driver and you want to switch from Uber to Lyft, that you have to start from scratch. Why? You are a reputable driver. If you are a reputable eBay seller and you want to go to Amazon, for example, you have to start from scratch. Why? That doesn't make sense. In the offline world, if you sell your goods in one part of the village versus another part of the village, your reputation travels with you. Why can't that happen online? And finally, it should be protected. Because if your identity is protected, only then you can use your identity without any problem, and we can forget the problems of identity theft. I'm not sure if anyone has ever encountered identity theft. I haven't, fortunately, and I hope you haven't either. But it can really, truly ruin your life. And in our book, for example, we have 4 stories of identity theft. And if you read it, it really gives you the chills on your bones of what happens to your life if your identity is actually stolen. So that's why we within the book, we start first with some introduction and then a large description and explanation of what blockchain work is and how it works. And then we go into identity, because that's the first problem, the wicked problem that we need to solve. And the other problem is that, the other problems that we discuss are, for example, climate change, there are censorship and fake news, there are democracy, fair trade, and the other one is corruption, which Pip will tell a bit more about.
Just to add one more little piece to this point about identity, is that there's 2 different types of fraud which I discuss in the little section that I do on fraud in the book. Mark also touches on it really, really well in identity. But there's just this distinction between subjective and objective fraud. There may be a better term I can use, I haven't thought of it yet. So just going with that for now, blockchain networks are very good at doing proof of work objectively. What is the work that is actually being done on the network? Where it has struggled is the subjective element, which is who's doing it. And that's the piece that Mark's talking about trying to resolve when we actually say in the book how the identity piece can be fixed. And I agree with Mark when he suggested it should be the first substantive chapter that followed straight on from the explainer for what is blockchain and how does it work. To me, it was absolutely the cornerstone of setting in train everything else that was done in the book. It was really important for that reason. In relation to corruption, the reason why I thought this was a really good example just for this morning, and this is very brief, is it highlights 2 very good features of the way that I think that the book really plays out well. Mark and I did not do all of the original work and scholarship that we have relied on in relation to, say, case studies about problems in Venezuela with corruption and surveillance and lack of free speech. There is a lot of scholarship, and we've done an analysis of it to then say how could blockchain solve the problem. Where the originality of our work really kicks in and where we've broken new ground is by being able to say you cannot simply describe the corruption, you have to actually drill into the mechanics of it and then ask yourself, is it something that could be fixed using a technology that has certain really key features? And you've got to see whether the 2 work together. And if they don't, there's probably either another solution or more work needs to be done. So that was how we then married the tech with the problem. And in relation to corruption, there are really 3 types. There's fraud, and then there's mismanagement, and then there's bureaucratic red tape. And all 3 lead to users of any kind of government instrument or government entity with bribes and secret commissions. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about greasing the wheels with bribes and secret commissions. And you might think, oh, well, look, if it gets things done, is it really that bad? Well, it is for 2 reasons. Number 1, you're not getting the best decision made. you're getting decisions made, influenced by the fact that somebody's just given you an underhand payment. And the second reason is that corruption creates a culture of corruption. It just dripples down into the society that is now completely corrupted by the way that governments are running. And this is playing out. I think Venezuela was a good use case that we came up with. Norway's got a great supply of oil, actually knows how to have a pretty wealthy society. It's quite a stable society. Venezuela's got more oil than Norway. And why aren't they actually as wealthy and as stable as Norway? Well, it's because they've actually got a country that's in complete political disarray. And that disarray has really been shown with the level of corruption throughout the whole country. So how do you fix it? Well, you need to work out what's going on, why is there corruption, which is it? Is it outright fraud, is it mismanagement, or is it red tape? And then you need to go to the other side of the equation and you need to ask yourself, well, what is it that you can actually do with technology that will improve it? And I think the three killer questions are, how can you bring in transparency? So transparency, I think, is the first one. Secondly, eliminate secrecy. Now, secrecy is an important word because people think about privacy, secrecy, and confidentiality as being the same. They're not. Governments do not have the right to secrets except in the tiniest little corner of their universe, perhaps when it's in the national interest. But really, other than that, not entitled to secrecy. Transparency is the cornerstone of a good government. You need responsible government, you need representative government, but you also need it to be transparent. Companies don't need to be transparent. Companies are entitled to commercial confidence. Humans are entitled to privacy. And when you understand those three and how they interact with each other, it's important to know how you can make each of the players in that economy accountable for what it is that they do. So if you create a blockchain-based relationship with your government, and you say, for example, aid will have to be on a blockchain, or tenders for government jobs, or tenders for actual business arrangements, either internationally or domestically, or if you say, well, we're actually going to have a government that's going to deliver services and welfare in a certain way, and you want to make it absolutely transparent, you can do that while also protecting the identity of the individuals, the commercial confidence of companies and industry, and also that little corner of any government secrets that are disclosed to the extent that you're told there are certain things we keep secret and everything else is transparent. So blockchain can do this because it is capable of advertising and making transparent the proof of work without necessarily revealing all the other information that is more sensitive. Certain things can be on-chain, for example, the activity of individuals and organisations, and then you can put off-chain and into secure spaces that which shouldn't or doesn't need to be disclosed. So we've given some really good examples in the book, and what we're trying to do with each of the chapters is to, in a really sort of scaffolded and layered way, deliver a set of examples where, for example, if you're reading chapter 7 and you can see in a discrete way something, for example, about fair trade, you would then be able to say, well, having read the chapter on identity, I can understand how that piece fits into a very complicated puzzle that's trying to solve a very difficult and, as we would say, wicked problem. Can I just say something about chapter 10? Okay, so just to finish off, are you going to finish off completely? So what I wanted to just say in relation to the way that these solutions are articulated throughout the book is that what we come up with in the end is the way digital transactions, because we're talking about online activity being digitised, or off-chain or offline activity having a digital presence or proof of work, and making it transparent, secure and tamper-proof, is that we've got these examples that then can be translated into business models. And so there's a piece of work in chapter 10 of the book that then says, having taken all of these examples that are really for social good and for universal and global good, you can actually take each of those examples and see how they translate into better business practices as well. And I think that gives it a very, very strong grounding for a roadmap for the way that blockchain can be used in a more commercial way, as opposed to just in a way that's for global good. So that's the essence and the truth of it. I don't know what Mark's plans are, but I can already see where the second edition is going to go because there's so much to be done on this. But does anybody want to ask any questions of either Mark or me? I'm not quite sure what the timing is, Chantal.
What we might do is go to Phil and then do questions.
Open up questions. Yeah. Awesome. Did you want to add anything before we hand over, Mark? Okay, so that's it on our book, and thank you very much, but I'll hand over to Phil. Thank you.
Please welcome Phil Shelper from Loyalty and Reward Co. Oh, okay. Maybe we will do some Q&A. So, Philippa, would you like to read?
Yep.
Thank you. So, sorry about that, everyone. We just get to...
During this little intro radio, we'll have a Q&A. Anybody got any questions? Yes, question.
One issue I continue to think about, but haven't really delved into, is this 51% attack on the network. And you mentioned transparency around the nodes, but not the controls. So I was wondering, are you able to shed any light on how big a risk to blockchain is 51% attack? Is it real or not?
Okay, so for anybody who's listening on Facebook or who hasn't heard the question's a good one. It's about the 51% attack where you have a majority of users who are able to exercise a form of consensus to either control or manipulate what that network is doing, or even go with a hard fork, for example. Do you want to have a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. It's a very interesting question because it is a problem that could occur. And if you look at, for example, Bitcoin, we think that Bitcoin is a decentralized currency. It is not. You know, I mentioned the idea of the proof of work. It's a difficult equation that needs to be solved. As a result, that requires a lot of energy, a lot of money, and as a result, a lot of miners are pooling up together. As a result, we have like 6 or 7 mining pools in the world, which happen to be predominantly in China because it's cold and energy is cheap, who control basically the network. So Bitcoin is not decentralized; it's sort of a semi-decentralized, centralized currency. I don't think this will happen, but technically, theoretically speaking, if a government would not like this to happen, then they could do something about it, theoretically speaking. The blockchain, the Bitcoin is only one currency and only one type of blockchain. And there are dozens of other currencies and other blockchains which solve these kind of issues in different ways. Proof of work is only one consensus mechanism, which is not a very good one because it requires so much energy. We also have, for example, proof of stake, which is about the stake that you have within a currency. You put that on the line, and if you act in the incorrect way, you lose your stake. So you have an incentive to do the right thing. So 51% attacks are always sort of, looming, and you have to be careful of how to build your blockchain startup if you want to deal with it. But the more decentralized a platform is, the less likely it is to happen.
A lot of the work that I'm hearing about in the standards work is where industry and government are looking at not just permissionless public blockchains, but also some of the permissioned blockchains, and there is a bit of there's a bit of tension in the community at the moment as to whether you can have permissioned public and private, and permissionless public and private. Let's not go there, but in general, it is possible to have permissioned blockchains where in order to get on or to ramp onto the on-chain network, you give away certain information that's necessary to an off-chain controller or organizer. So for example, the registration of land. You would do that in a permissioned way. I don't think the threat of the 51% attack arises in those environments. I think as a matter of just good sort of nomenclature or delineation, that should only be really regarded as a vulnerability that would exist in the permissionless blockchain environments and on those networks. Any other questions? Yes, another one.
Yes, it goes to what you've just been talking about. In the computing area, I've worked for a long time, there's this term called garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
What the chain does is maintain that garbage all the way through. How do you mentioned off-chain verification of identity, how do you see the future of blockchain, and you just referred to permissionless blockchains, in ensuring that what gets onto the chain is not garbage?
Okay, so it's a great question, and it's based on this garbage in, garbage out concept, and how do you maintain and verify the quality of what's going on chain and then use it in a way that's going to be meaningful. I think that that's where there's actually a fair bit of human heavy lifting has to happen, and the verification of exactly what the data is. There is a lot of work being done on how to actually verify the quality of information and data in the first place. But what I will say is that once it is detected that there is garbage in the system, it is possible, even though you don't go backwards and reverse the transactions, you can create positive forward transactions that actually can deal with that garbage in. You can actually create events that record that the quality of that particular data or information is not to be valued in the same way that certain other is. I think for blockchain networks to be truly agile and to move quickly and not to suffer from the kind of bloat that we're seeing with the blockchain that's running Bitcoin, what will happen is a lot of very secure information will be maintained in quite traditional secure databases with smart contracts managing the relationship between the data and the ledger. And it's the ledger that will be on the blockchain, and that's the part that will be immutable. I don't see heavily bogged down blockchains being the future. I think there'll be numerous discrete blockchains that are maybe permissioned, and then it's the ledger that will be more public and reportable, and what you'll do is just have simple apps on your phones. As for the architecture of it, I just see we have internet, blockchain, apps or dApps, depending on the kind of blockchain network you're running, and then the user experience and the human interaction will be an app on your phone. And most users will not even ask themselves how it is that when they enter certain information or verify with their eye or their fingerprint, how it is that it then connects to what's happening in the back room. We're all interested in that now because we're getting excited about the technology. I don't think it's going to be part of the user experience. The users will be able to, though, report into the system and feed in where information is incorrect. I think we're going to get very good at seamlessly feeding back in information that verifies data.
So the experience with fake news and spam and all the rest of it shows that at that edge between a trusted source of data and a linked-in cryptographically secured, you've got the edge getting into that.
Yeah.
And you have a potential battleground, if you like, between people with good information and people with bad information.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to let Mark answer this question about this edge, and because he wrote a really good piece, I think it was at the end of last year, on edge computing, or what was known as fog computing, I think. So that's exactly, Mark's written about this.
I think you struck a very good, important point in your question first, because blockchain does not magically turn low quality data into high quality data. And if you present low quality data in the right way to the blockchain, it will end up on the blockchain. So whether you use, you're dealing with the edge of a network, or whether you are trying to confirm authorship of an article, whatsoever, in any way you need to write master data management programs and governance. So when we talk about blockchain, and when you are starting to implement blockchain technology within your business, the requirement for governance is only becoming more important. And it is already important, because if you have low quality data within your organization, you are already having a problem, especially with AI coming our way, where we have biased data. So master data management or data governance is only becoming more and more important. And that's especially true when you have data which is on the blockchain and is there forever. Yes, you can append it with new transactions, but still the data will be there until the end of times. And that's something to be aware of. So I think we'll switch over. Just one final thing I want to mention, just another plug. The book will be ready August 17 in English, and if you are interested, also in Chinese. Let us know if you've read it and give us some feedback. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Phil Shelper. I'm CEO of a company called Loyalty and Reward Co. I moved into the studio with my team about 4 weeks ago, and we're focusing very heavily on blockchain loyalty, so I'm going to talk about that today. This is a little bit about our company. So Loyalty and Reward Co was formed 5 years ago, and what we focus on is pure loyalty program design. So we work with big companies to either design them a program from scratch, or we help them to improve their program with some strategic recommendations. This is some of the companies that we've worked with over the last 5 years. And as part of what we do, we join a lot of loyalty programs. So at last count, I was a member of about 140 different loyalty programs. I've studied many more, which I haven't bothered to join, in order to try and understand what it is that makes a really good program and what are some of the core problems with programs. We also run a lot of market research for our clients as well, and we get to hear from different demographics within society around how they feel about loyalty programs. And generally what we're hearing isn't so healthy, to be honest with you. So some of the things that we hear about with respect to loyalty programs is that they're failing to deliver. So the first problem is there's a lot of disillusion. People walk into a retailer, they're asked to join a program, they decide to join, they shop a few more times, they're not really getting any value, and so they end up throwing the card in the bin. Actually, there's some studies that show every 21 to 24 months we go through our wallet or our purse and we do a loyalty card cull. Because the cards that get thrown out are the ones that we see we're not actually getting any value out of that program anymore. So a lot of people are really turning their back on loyalty programs, particularly young people. The other big problem is there's loyalty programs everywhere. So every shop you walk into, they've got a loyalty program. Every company you engage with, they're asking you to join their loyalty program. And they all pretty much feel the same. You shop, you get some points, you can exchange those points for a highly inflated good. And it's not really doing much to drive any meaningful type of differentiation for that brand. It's really just something that they have to have because their competitors do. Actually, what's really interesting, if you're a loyalty nerd like I am, is when you look at loyalty programs within a specific industry, they all tend to be very similar. And this is because one company will come up with a loyalty program and their competitors will say, oh, we need to have one too, and they'll replicate, and everyone sort of rushes to the same spot. So this whole idea of creating something to provide some differentiation just ends up being a total homogenous play. It's very disappointing for a experienced loyalty program designer like myself. The third problem that we have, and you all would have experienced this, is the marketing assault. You walk in, you join a loyalty program, and before you know it, you're getting 5 to 7 emails a week trying to sell you products which you don't really want. I did a consulting project for a company last year who sell beds, towels and quilt covers, and they send 6 emails a week to their database with bed, sheet and quilt cover special offers. Now, I don't know about you, but once I've bought up on my towels, sheets and quilt covers, I don't really need any more for a couple of years, so I don't need to be hearing from them 6 times a week, but it's actually quite a consistent thing. I'm currently doing some work for a major liquor retailer in Australia who's got 3 of the biggest brands in the market, and they're sending out 3 EDMs to their entire base every week across each of the brands, so 9 EDMs in total if you belong to all of their programs. And the same EDM goes to everyone. No segmentation, no personalisation, just marketing assault. And I think for the most part what we're hearing through market research are people are just sick of it. Yeah. So what we've been doing is going through this journey of trying to figure out how we can solve these problems, because if you can solve these problems, that is going to lead us to coming up with a new type of loyalty program that will hopefully change the way that companies can interact and reward their members. So a program that will deliver genuine value, a program that's going to genuinely differentiate that company from their competitors, and a program that has permission marketing so that members are receiving marketing promotions that they want to receive and that they're being rewarded for receiving. Okay. So as part of our journey, we were looking at a lot of different types of things, and we did quite a bit of research. So the first research that we did that was really interesting, once again if you're a loyalty nerd, is we went and looked at the entire history of loyalty programs. And the first loyalty program kind of, bit of a stretch here, but anyway. It was back in ancient Egypt, so sorry if you can't see that very well. In ancient Egypt, they didn't have money, so people were provided in these little tokens that were made out of wood, and they were painted to look like a piece of bread or a jug of beer, because that's what you got paid in, that was your main diet. So if you went and worked, you get these tokens, and you could then go and exchange them for the real thing. Now, if you were a foreman or you're higher up in the hierarchy, you get bonus tokens for the work that was being done. And if you had extra tokens, you could exchange them for things other than bread and beer. So it's actually the exact same structure as what you would see with the modern frequent flyer program. They've got their tiers of workers who get bonuses, and they can exchange them for flights or for 5,000 different products on the Qantas frequent flyer store. So what's really interesting is that model is carried through all the way through to today. So in 1793, there was a merchant in the US who started providing their members with copper tokens, which they could save up in exchange for a reward. In 1872, the Grain Union Tea Company started providing tickets to their customers, which they could then exchange for rewards, and they produced an annual catalogue of rewards which they'd send out to all of their customers as well. In 1896, SMH brought out stamps, and this is the first major coalition program we've seen in history. They would sell the stamps to retailers, who would then give them to their customers. They'd stick them in a book, and they could then buy things with their books of stamps. What's really interesting about this is it became a global program, and it actually lasted for 90 years. It lasted all the way up until the 1970s, when a series of recessions hit the US, and it took out the bottom of their business model, because it was very expensive, very high overheads. This is all pre-computers, and so they tried to reduce down the amount of value they were giving away, and it destroyed the program. But what did happen then was the deregulation of the airline industry in the US, which gave birth to frequent flyer programs. So American Airlines realised that they needed to be more competitive, and they invented the frequent flyer program with miles as the currency in order to be a lot more competitive and maintain the loyalty of their members. That was followed later on when Southwest introduced points, and Qantas frequent flyer launched that same year. So what we saw from our research was the core essence of a loyalty program never changes. You spend money with a retailer, you get a currency, and then you can exchange that currency for a reward. But what does change is the actual currency itself. Throughout history, there's always been a dominant currency, and we think it's time for points and miles to be retired, and a new currency to take their place. And this is where we come to crypto. So crypto is really fascinating because unlike points and miles, which have a static value, the valuation of a cryptocurrency constantly fluctuates. Now, I'll talk in a little bit about why that is very interesting from a loyalty perspective. But what we did in order to ascertain whether cryptocurrency could be suitable as a loyalty currency is we looked all around the world to say, okay, what research have people done on this? There was already a number of blockchain loyalty companies that had sprung up and done successful ICOs, but we couldn't find any research whatsoever. There was just nothing. So we thought, well, opportunity here. So we went and organised with the University of New South Wales Computer Science and Engineering faculty to run some research last year. So we ran it over September and October. We set up a mini loyalty program on UNSW campus. We signed up 12 merchants on campus, and the members who were students and staff of UNSW could go and transact at those retailers and earn Ether. So Ether is number 2 cryptocurrency after blockchain, so after Bitcoin. And we ran a survey at the end, and the results were really quite astounding. And this was across students and staff, so it was quite a good demographic mix. But what we found was they said 78% said, yes, I was more motivated and actually went and spent more money with retailers in order to get more Ether, versus 59% for their favourite points-based loyalty program. We got an 85% NPS rating for people saying, yeah, I'd recommend this to family and friends if it continued. and 86% said I'd much rather this type of program than one when I earn points. But what was most interesting was the students and staff reported that they were going in and checking what the value of their holding was on average about 5 times a day. Okay? Now, if you think about a points-based program, you don't really go and check because you know how many points you've got. Even your own bank account, you probably only go in there once or twice a week. You're not really going in to see how much money you've got unless you're expecting a payment. So to see a new type of loyalty program where there was that obsessive engagement with the program and with the value that they were receiving, and the hope that that value is going to increase massively in value was a really critical insight for us, and one which we're now carrying through into working with some of our clients. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, you know, this is what we believe is the solution to what ails the loyalty industry. A blockchain loyalty program where you reward members with a cryptocurrency instead of points. So you can transact across different medium. We've got a digital wallet where you can load other cryptocurrencies in as well in order to help facilitate transactions with other crypto, which, as everyone knows, is one of the big problems that's yet to be solved. And then you can spend with a retailer, you can sell on an exchange, you can transfer to a friend, and best of all, unlike points, crypto never expires. So the value that's provided to that member, they get to keep irrespective of whether they continue to transact with the program or not. Loyalty Norco has been very fortunate to actually be brought on to a couple of blockchain loyalty projects, which is very fun. The first one is Easy Token Rewards. So Easy Token Rewards is a program which has been launched by a company called EasyPOS. They're based in Vietnam and in Singapore, and they have a point of sale platform. So what they did in January, they did an ICO where they raised US 12 million, and they sold about 11.5 million of their tokens, so total 50 million created. And we're now working with them to actually help them launch their program, starting up in Brisbane, and then expanding to the rest of Australia and then into Asia. And it's very fascinating. So we've also taken over their investor communications, and there's a lot of excitement from their investors as well about the launch of the program. Easy Token also have their own internal exchange, which they're looking to launch as a public trading exchange as well. So there's a lot of potential. Now, why this is really interesting and kind of, I guess, building on the presentation that you guys have just had, if you start talking blockchain or cryptocurrencies with a consumer, you're already dead, okay? Because they don't get it. And actually, when we started our work with the Easy Token team up in Brisbane about 6 weeks ago, we actually sat them down and said, tell us about Easy Token Rewards. And we played dumb consumers. So they said, well, it's on the blockchain. We're like, what's the blockchain? And they went down one rabbit hole. And it's a cryptocurrency. What's a cryptocurrency? Well, it's like Bitcoin. What's Bitcoin? So what you find is if you try and talk about the underlying technology, you get lost very quickly. Now, in order to try and tackle this problem, what we've done is we actually look back to the exact same situation that happened when the internet was invented. It was all HTML and coding and information superhighway, and most people are like, I don't get it. Because when you talk to a consumer, you don't talk to them about how something works, you talk to them about what it means for them and what their experience is going to be. And so that's how we've positioned Easy Token Rewards, which will be launching in June. So this is what we've come up with as our brand positioning. A shopping reward you can trade. So you can shop at a retailer, earn Easy Token with every dollar you spend. You can hold and see if the value rises, and they can go into the app and actually see what's happening with the value they're holding in Australian dollars at any one time. Or they can go and trade and save at participating retailers. They can also trade on the Easy Token exchange, they can transfer, and there's no expiry as well. So what you'll see here is there's no mention of blockchain, there's no mention of cryptocurrency. It's all about what is the experience going to be for those members, and we're very interested to see how this resonates when we launch it. in June. I guess in finishing, the thing that I find most fascinating and exciting about this space is there's a lot of blockchain loyalty companies that have launched, but yet there's none of them that have actually managed to get the program up and running in any level of scale in order to give us a decent understanding of whether this is going to be something massively revolutionary, something that's going to sit beside points and miles, or be a total dud. I'm pretty confident it's not going to be a total dud, but what the future holds for blockchain loyalty and its applications is really fascinating. Where it does have a lot of potential is it solves a problem that most of the blockchain loyalty companies in the world are really struggling with, which is that they've created a cryptocurrency, but they don't actually have any meaningful use for that currency. So what you'll find, if you look at the way that the valuation of most cryptocurrencies over the last 6 months have gone, there was a big peak over Christmas, and then a big drop off in March, and now things are starting to build up again. And it's very consistent because most of the cryptocurrency action is happening via speculative trading, and so whatever the value of that currency is really dependent on whichever way the market is blowing. Whereas for a loyalty program, the big opportunity is most of the buy and sell behaviour is actually happening within the program itself, and there's only a small amount of trading on the exchanges in order to help regulate the fair market value. So cryptocurrencies for loyalty programs, we believe is the killer application of cryptocurrencies, and we're very excited to see how it plays out. Thank you very much. Is there any questions? That man over there.
If you've got a loyalty program where you're issuing your own currency, or you're issuing a currency which is tradable,
Yep.
what's the striking benefit for the retailer that you don't just spend it elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I've got two answers for that. The first one is if you're part of a major coalition loyalty program such as Qantas Frequent Flyer or Velocity Flybuys, that sort of thing, you're paying out money for the points, so you buy the points from the Frequent Flyer program in order to give to your members. 91% of all of the Qantas Frequent Flyer points that are given out are spent on flights, and the rest are spent on their store where they make a healthy margin as well. So actually most retailers are quite comfortable with the idea of this because there's other benefits to being part of that program, such as access to their marketing channels, getting incremental revenue because they're associated with that program, people actually seeking out their business to earn the token, earn the points. But the other way that we're approaching this, particularly within the framework of a blockchain loyalty program, is making it very easy for members to redeem with merchants and making it attractive for them to do so. So some of the merchants that we're bringing in for the program will actually give you additional discounts if you spend with tokens versus using cash. But also the app makes it very easy to redeem. We've also got, the Australian legal system helping us out a little bit here, because if someone earns and redeems the tokens within the program with participating merchants, they don't need to do KYC or AML checks. As soon as they want to go and transfer it onto an exchange and start trading it, they need to go through those checks. So there's a bit of an apathy play there as well. Yeah, that's it. What we've seen with programs like Qantas is they're very good at price positioning everything to keep the focus on spending on flights. So we'll be implementing some of their tricks as well. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Are customers able to differentiate these cryptocurrency-based loyalty programs from normal ones? Because the way you describe it there, for instance, it's really good at making it simple for a consumer.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to see what is the actual difference.
Yes, I guess the key things, the key focus there is the first one is that the points, that the tokens don't expire. So we've collaborated with Adam Posner, based down in Melbourne, who runs Australia's biggest loyalty survey every year. And the number one irritant for consumers in Australia regarding loyalty programs is that points expire. That's the really big one. The second one is value, and the value is where we're going to get a lot of engagement because unlike points where the value just remains static, people will be able to see that the value of EasyToken is changing constantly. And because it's a finite number of tokens, the more demand that we generate for the token within the program, the more the price will rise just based on pure economics. So people, if everything goes according to plan, get a lot more value out of the program, and they'll have a lot more security in the tokens never expiring. So they're the two big things that we're playing up. Sorry, what's that? The promise of inflation. Exactly right, yeah. That's it. Yeah, Kit?
Is it GST exempt when you make that purchase with the Easy Tokens? What happens with GST?
So because, well, the way that it works is you go, so let's say you go and spend $100 and the retailer gives you 5% back in tokens, so you get $5 worth of tokens. If you want to go and redeem those tokens, then you say, I want to spend $5 of tokens. The retailer puts it into the point of sale and it just acts as a discount. So the GST is just naturally working into that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So your Easy Tokens you can use to pay for a service. Now there are blockchain projects that have created utility tokens that have to be used.
Yep.
Pay for a service.
Yeah.
Quite distinct tokens. Would you classify the second kind aren't really loyalty?
Yeah.
It's different to a loyalty program.
Yeah, it is, and it's a really good question. We think that if you're creating a company that creates a token and you're then forcing people to have to use that token in order to use your product, that's a really crappy business model because actually that's not putting the customer at the centre of everything. If you want a business where the customer is at the centre of everything, you want to give them as many options as possible for how they can interact and transact with you so that they're choosing the way that they want to do it. The only reason that people are doing that business model is to justify the existence of the cryptocurrency. Actually, the cryptocurrency is not required. They only needed it in order to raise a whole heap of money so that they could then go and build out their business and their platform. And they've put that in place in order to justify the existence of the token and try to generate revenue from it. Whereas with a loyalty program, the token is central to everything. You're earning the token, you're redeeming the token. The program cannot exist without the token, it's fundamental to it. But if you look at the vast majority of blockchain companies around the world, they could easily exist without a token, or they could simply use a popular token such as Ether and not need it. So it's very much just been a fundraising effort for them to do that.
It's interesting because Ethereum works that way. Yeah, you need to use Ethereum to pay to use their service.
Exactly, yeah. So Ethereum's been very popular primarily because it's been powering so many ICOs. So people have had to buy in order to participate in ICOs. So yeah, it very much works in that way. Now, that being said, what's a really important point is you don't need to create your own crypto token in order to have a blockchain loyalty program either. You could just as easily use an existing cryptocurrency and it can work just as effectively. But there is some significant commercial benefits from creating your own crypto token, such as having a reserve of tokens which can increase in value as the popularity rises, being able to generate some initial funds to build it and so on and so forth. Yeah.
What about the privacy of people that use it? Are you going to sell their purchase history to other people like Everyday Rewards do with Woolworths, or because that'd be a concern for people as well?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And earlier on in the presentation, I talked about permission marketing and stopping the marketing assault. So the other area that we're looking at quite extensively is blockchain marketing. And this is where when the member joins the program, they're provided with a wallet to store all of their crypto tokens, but also to store all of their personal data. and only they have the key to access all of that data. We then put them in a position where they can actually choose to share that data with brands in exchange for crypto tokens. So at the moment, if you join a program, you're giving all your data away, the program owns that data, they can do whatever they want with it, and if you had any idea of what some of the big loyalty programs such as Woolworths Rewards and Flybuys are doing with your data, you would be horrified. Okay, so under blockchain marketing, it's all about giving the power of the data back to the member, and then rewarding them for sharing that data with brands that they want to share with, so they've got that control.
Phil, I know time is short, but just a quick question.
Yeah.
You're saying the value of the token can increase.
Yeah.
So I have a question around that. If it's a marketplace where it's traded with these retailers who sign up to it. But secondly, if I'm a retailer and I give you $5 worth of a token, and then next week it's worth $10, you come back to redeem it.
Yeah.
What's in it for me?
Well, the retailer has a very happy customer who's going to want to continue to engage with them. Yeah, that's right. But also, that's right. They've now got a member who's got lots of value that they want to reinvest back in that business. We've also designed the program so that the retailers themselves never actually have to hold any of the tokens, so that they're insulated from any volatility. So if a member walks into the store and they transact, the retailer contributes a percentage of that total transaction. That's taken and put it in the member's wallet. So as an example, if the member spends $100 and the retailer contributes $5 back, we'll buy $5 of tokens from the exchange to give to the member. If the member then next week it's worth $10 or $2, whatever the case may be, wants to redeem that, then we'll take that amount, we'll sell the tokens on the exchange, and we'll give the money to the retailer. So yeah, so they're protected from that volatility. Thank you very much.
I realise everyone has to go, but thank you. That was absolutely fantastic, Phil and Pip and Mark. And best wishes for the launch of the book. We'll let everyone know via the group when the book launches. And best wishes for your trip home tomorrow. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, everyone.